Good afternoon, Chairman.
Good afternoon.
You're now live. Yep, you're now live.
Right, excellent. Well, good afternoon and welcome everybody to this online meeting of Adults and Community Wellbeing Committee, which is a formal public meeting. The audio feed of this meeting is being broadcasted via the County Council's website. I would also like to welcome the members of the public who are listening to this online. Attendance, I would like to confirm the members of the committee who are present. Trina Cope, Senior Democratic Services Officer, will ask the members of the committee to indicate their presence after their name is called.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. Could I please ask you to confirm your presence when your name is called? Councillor Hugo Markley.
Present.
Councillor Elizabeth Sneath, Chairman. We've had notification that Councillor Sneath will be late.
Yes.
Councillor Bob Adams. No. Okay. Councillor Mrs. Paula Cooper.
Present.
Councillor Robert Folkes.
Present.
Councillor Rob Kendrick. Thank you. Councillor Julie Kelly.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Christine Lawton.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Marianne Overton.
The link to her council.
Councillor Christopher Reid.
She has gone back, so.
And Councillor Mark Whittington.
Present.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And I'd also like to welcome Councillor Patricia Bradwell, Executive Councillor for Adult Care, Health and Children's Services, and Glenn Garrett, Executive Director, Adult Care and Community Wellbeing. I'd just like to say I have spoken to Councillor Bradwell, and she will be present for most of the meeting, but does have to nip out of the room for other commitments along the way. And I'd also like to welcome all the other officers present who will be introduced at the beginning of their item. I would like to ask members of the committee and other participants to type speak using the chat function when you wish to ask a question or make a contribution. Please turn off your cameras and microphone when not participating in the debate. However, as it is now possible for democratic services and some laptop users to see up to 49 people on the screen, there is no need for any roll call voting. As previously, when we conclude an item, I will ask all the committee members to turn on their camera and all others present to turn off their videos off. We can then use a show of hands so that it is visible on camera to democratic services. Laptop users will have to be be due to receive an update. Some have done that, and iPad users will not have the facility to view the 49 people. Any other issues? Anybody can raise at any time. Thank you. So we'll go on to apologies for absence and replacement members.
Thank you, Chairman. None received.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of members. Do members have any interest? Or if they do, as we are going through and they suddenly realise, then please let us know at the time. Take it everybody is okay on the declarations of interest. So we'll go to minutes to confirm the minutes of the meeting on the 1st of July 2020 as a correct record. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
I'll propose Hugo. That's Robert Folkes.
Thank you. Seconder?
Yeah, I'll second that. Hugo, it's Chris Reid.
Right, brilliant. Thank you. So now we'll test the new system. So can we all committee members turn on their cameras And can all those in favour please raise their hand, not the hand on the Teams? Has that worked, Katrina?
Yes, it has, Chairman. That's unanimous. Everybody's hands are waving. Okay, thank you very much. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Okay, so 4 we'll go to announcement by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Executive Director. Councillor Bradwell, Glenn, do you have anything that you would like to announce? The only thing which I will announce was when we did the overview and scrutiny last week, Management Board, it was very pleasing to see the latest figures and reports, and adult social care was performing very well indeed. And I think that's a credit to Glenn and the whole team to take on some of the challenges that we've had so far this year to still perform budgetary wise. Other than that, we will move on to the first agenda item, number 5. One more thing actually, just before I go, because I believe that Carolyn Nice was going to be about today, but unfortunately she's not. And I think I would like to wish her, on behalf of the committee, the very best in her new job, and she's moving not that far away, but she's been very good for adults and has been very dedicated and very impressive by the way that she's always conducted herself, and from me and everyone else, I'd like to just wish her the best going forward. So on that then, I will then go on to the centre. Hi Glenn, did you want to say something? So on that, we'll go to item number 5, Centre for Ageing Better, the Rural Strategic Partnership. And the presenters are Glenn Gowan, Samantha Neal and Andy Fox. And Andy Fox is Public Health Consultant, and Samantha Neal is Assistant Director, Prevention and Early Intervention. So welcome you all.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and I'd also like to just introduce Michelle Howard, who's Assistant Director at East Lindsey District Council. It seems a long time ago now, but about a year ago, Michelle instigated this piece of work off the back of something that was happening in East Lindsey, which was around becoming an age-friendly community. And at that point in time, the Centre for Ageing Better was looking for a rural strategic partner. And we took the opportunity jointly between our 2 organisations, but as a consortium of organisations across Lincolnshire, to make a bid to be that rural strategic partner. It felt like the longest job interview in history, but to cut a long story short, at the end of March this year, the Centre confirmed that they would like to work with Lincolnshire as their rural strategic partner. So Lincolnshire now joins Greater Manchester and Leeds as the 3 partners for the centre. There are no plans to take on any further strategic partners, so that is the 3 of us. The intention is that we work very much to raise the profile of Lincolnshire and the work that we do in the county, but also to draw on the expertise of the Centre for Ageing Better in the relationships that they have with other organisations. And the aim really is to focus very much on the needs and experiences of people who are approaching later life. So that's people in their 50s and 60s now, to understand how they experience life in a large rural coastal county, and to understand the things that we can impact on now, but also into the longer term as they become older people. So it gives us a really good platform to shout about the things that we do really well already. But it also gives us the opportunity to be innovative and to look for ways of doing things differently. And certainly in discussions with Councillor Bradwell, Councillor Leyland from East Lindsey's point of view, there's a real appetite and real ambition to use this as an opportunity to go further faster with some of the things we've been talking about, but also to develop some new areas of work. We've done quite a lot of work behind the scenes over the last few months thinking about governance arrangements. We've established the Memorandum of Understanding, which is attached to Appendix 1. And we've had the first meeting of the Lincolnshire partners as a small steering group, with a further formal steering group taking place at the end of September. And we started to really flesh out now what some of the areas of work will be. And two of them that I'm going to ask both Michelle and Andy to briefly speak about are around housing and around health and wellbeing. So the centre has 4 key areas of priority, as you'd have seen in the report. We intend to do work around all 4 of those, but in terms of hitting the ground running and getting started, housing and health are the 2 areas where we feel we can scale up very quickly. You'll see in the report that Lincolnshire will benefit from the Centre for Ageing Better employing a partnership manager. It's taken us a while to find the right person. We went to interview twice. I'm not able to tell you who's got that role yet because it's still subject to references, but I'm really pleased that we have now got a partnership manager who will be joining us in the next couple of months. And their role will be to develop now quite a detailed work programme so that we can come back to yourselves and others, including the GLEP and the Health and Wellbeing Board, to report on progress, to set key milestones and be able to demonstrate the impact. So I think if it's all right with you, Mr. Chairman, what I'd like to do is just invite Michelle briefly to speak about the housing piece of work and also Andy around the health piece of work. And just to note that Appendix 2 to the report, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about it, it's quite a busy chart, but it does show some of the examples of work that both Greater Manchester and Leeds have developed over the last few years of their relationships with the Centre for Ageing Better. That provides some opportunities for us to learn about what's happened elsewhere. So I'll hand over on that point to Michelle and then to Andy.
Okay,
thank you. Well, welcome, Michelle. And I hate to say it, I've got to declare an interest as I'm over 50 now. But I'll let you take it away then.
Thank you.
And welcome, Andy, as well. And one final thing, Rob, I did see you wanted to speak and I missed that. So if you want to come in after we do this agenda item, unless it's related to this agenda item. Thank you.
That's okay, Hugo. I'll bring it up at the work programme at the end.
Okay, shall I pick up on the housing elements? I think just before I do, I just want to really stress the point about this being a programme over the next 5 years that can really help us to prepare Lincolnshire residents for later life. It's a really, really key element of this. So helping people to be active, healthy, well and economically active for as long as they possibly can in a way that's appropriate to them. And that makes it quite different from programmes that we've perhaps seen in other places previously. In terms of the housing work, this feels it's got a really natural fit in terms of the aspirations for the Health and Wellbeing Board and for the Housing, Health and Care Delivery Group. There are 2 key elements. The first being around the condition, the quality and the accessibility of existing housing stock within Lincolnshire. And the second element being around the design, the quality and accessibility of new housing within Lincolnshire. I think it's fair to say that the first programme that I described is the better developed, and that really is reflective of how far Lincolnshire has already come. And when we talk about new existing housing, we talk about everything relating to accessibility, adaptations, equipment, and all of those things that go into helping people to stay at home for as long as possible. So there isn't just one element here, and it really is about having a comprehensive and system-wide approach to giving people the best possible chance of staying healthy and well at home. So things like this will include, from a customer's perspective, do we have the right things in place from them leaving hospital, from them sort of starting to struggle at home? Are we able to be consistent across the county? Are we making the best use of our resources and our budgets? And are we really understanding the continuum of need from a customer's perspective to make sure that they can stay safe and well at home? And within Lincolnshire, it can be complex in a 2-tier area. And when we take DFG as a single example of an element within that, there's been a huge amount of work focused on pathways, policies and processes and talking about system rather than organisation, but this allows us to take it a step further to understand what our customers really want and need from us in Lincolnshire. So for the housing element, this would sit very much as a work programme working with all of the partners in the Housing, Health and Care Group, districts and county council key partners within that, but also all of our health colleagues, registered provider colleagues and beyond. Accessibility and suitability of housing also will include us looking at things around affordable warmth and other things that we can do to ensure that people can stay safe and well at home. And housing is really a key foundation for anybody remaining well in the community. Some of that work has already started. Some of that mapping around customer journey will be a really key element of that. So working with the Centre for Ageing Better, we've started to work on what a programme would look like. And the first part of that really is about understanding the problem. And I think for everybody on this committee and for many of our colleagues, we all believe that we understand a significant amount of the problem, but actually we need to properly map that. We need to really understand where the barriers are, what we might need to do differently, and we need to invest some of that time through the coordinator that Sem has referenced, and also with the expertise and experience of the Centre for Ageing Better to properly map and understand that, so that when we come to the next phase, when we start to look at what might we do differently, what might we test and trial, we've got a strong foundation to do that on. So that first phase will take us around 3 months before we move into testing. The second element of the programme will be around how we can work with private developers, registered providers, to really be clear about what a Lincolnshire standard for housing will look like. You know, what does that need to look like in terms of design, accessibility? How do we influence appropriately? And how do we make sure that works in a rural area? So a lot of work ongoing on that. And we presented to the Housing, Health and Care Delivery Group last week. A lot of support from partners who are actively willing to engage with us to make this a reality. And as I said earlier, it's about really accelerating on the fantastic work that's already been done in Lincolnshire. So happy to take any questions on that now or later in the item, or I can hand over to Andy as you prefer.
Okay, I think we'll go to Andy and then deal with the questions all at the end, if that suits. Thank you. Hi, Andy.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murphy, Chair. Hello to those who I haven't met before. I'm Andy Fox, consultant in public health here at Lincolnshire. And I just want to talk you through very briefly the thinking around the healthier ageing, the health aspect of this work. And I won't go into too much detail, but I'll be happy to take questions, obviously, at the end. Suffice to say that really we're looking at preventing, obviously, complications of ill health, trying to keep people healthier for longer. And we're looking at that in classic public health parlance as primary and secondary prevention. I'll explain that. What I mean really is primary prevention is trying to stop people from developing conditions in the first place, which might limit the capacity to live the life that they want to in older age. Secondary prevention is more about working with those people who are starting to develop ill health to prevent further complications and ultimately severely limiting conditions and or sort of passing away early. So the primary prevention aspect I want to focus on here, and what I mean by that really is we're trying to prevent people from developing these conditions that will cause them to have a less than ideal and healthy older age. And we can be very specific about what that means in Lincolnshire, because we've done a lot of work. People may recall Derek Ward, the Director of Public Health's annual report last year, which looked at the leading causes of disability in Lincolnshire. And if we include not just the things that cause people to die, but the things that cause life-limiting conditions, we can see very clearly in Lincolnshire that we have a lot of the classic things that you'd expect, cardiovascular disease, dementia, cancers, but also musculoskeletal conditions. So this is problems with your bones, arthritis, bad back pain, but also poor mental health and emotional well-being, and that's often linked in older age to social isolation. And there are some underlying risk factors that tend to cluster around people in all of these areas. And the important point I'd like to press here really is that these things actually aren't inevitable. In Lincolnshire, we know, because we've looked at the data, there is a significant gap between some groups in terms of the length of life you live in good health. So this is the concept of disability-free life expectancy rather than just life expectancy. There's a massive gap between different groups in Lincolnshire. And what that tells me actually is that disability in older age isn't inevitable. And actually, although for many people it is obviously following a well-worn path that our health services know very well, it's not inevitable. And if we can address some of the underlying determinants that address these issues around, musculoskeletal health, dementia, cardiovascular health, then we can actually make a significant difference across the population. And so we're targeting people in that younger age group of sort of 50 plus who are in good health. Perhaps don't consider themselves to have any issues with their health at present, but may have some of the underlying risk factors. And those key risk factors would be high blood pressure, so hypertension, physical inactivity, so not being out and about and up, and it doesn't have to be, running marathons or doing triathlons and things like that. It's just about keeping the body ticking over, keeping active, and of course things like obesity, but also importantly that social isolation element. So we know that people that are well connected, that are living in community, do better. And so those are the key underlying risk factors. And we'd like to do some work through the Centre for Ageing Better to see how we can address those at that population level in Lincolnshire, not just focusing, as often is the pull, to the East Coastal Strip and the areas where we know we have already got levels of ill health, but looking at across the piece, across the Lincolnshire population, at these key risk groups who are perhaps not identifying as in significant need of NHS support or social care support at present, but who could be heading there. And we want to work with those people to address some of the underlying issues and help them to live the life they want to lead as they're older. So I'll pause there.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I'll open it up now to anybody that wants to speak. I think from my reading of this and take on it, I think it's an excellent job, well done, to get us on that government radar and be in this strategic partnership representing rural areas. And I think and the fact that East Lindsey and we're building on the well-being, it just complements this whole arrangement going forward. I think in some sense, I agree. I noticed when I was at 49, my youth started to fade a bit, and I had to take a slightly different approach because actually it wouldn't let me carry on. So, and I think when you do turn 50, you do start to look at the rest of you should do. If you don't, you need to, and start to look at it and say, right, what do I need? How do I need to be in shape for going on for the sort of the golden years? But I think my only thing with here is, and I think when it comes to finances, I think you're going to start and plan for finances. You need to be doing it as soon as you get a job and in your early 20s. And even if you just put £50 a month away, just start the pot building, as they said to me. Housing is, I think it is without doubt the thing. There's know what we're going to get, and that is always the biggest blocker to. I was just thinking when you said about this was whether in sort of trying to develop something with estate agents that where we sort of got those good facilities for care, i.e. if you've got a bungalow and you're selling it and it has a wet room. What we don't have is really, when you look at the housing market, they might do it, but half the time, the whole disability is sort of half in, half out. If you convert, you have to go with it. If you don't, you're in the old system. And in some sense, it might be that we just sort of try and really stimulate that private market with a unique Lincolnshire estate agents where they buy in and they just highlight, actually, I know we'd have to watch it and we would set a criteria, but it could be something that might just help, where it raises more profile to what people should start looking for. Because when we often talk about things, and often when we talk about wet rooms, it's often the first thing people think is, oh, well, you've got that if you've got a disability. Well, actually, if you've got kids and you've all been out and it's a wet day, it's the perfect place to throw the whole lot in and wash them all down. So there is tremendous benefits for a lot of the facilities in everyday life. And I think at times we don't really often highlight that, certainly in the housing market. And it's often because people don't look at it and respect it enough. Often what happens is someone goes and buys a bungalow and then rips out all the stair lifts and everything else that cost a fortune to put in. And it might not be done by us, but it's still a waste if somebody spent their own money. And in some sense, if it was highlighted better, it just might help keep that market stimulated to develop itself better. And also it might show a bit of initiative right across the country that, hey ho, we're on a roll to really try and drive the agenda forward. That's my view. So I've got some speakers. So I've got Rob first and then Christine.
Thanks, Hugo. I think this is obviously very interesting project. The one question I was going to ask is, and I apologise if I've missed it when reading through the papers, is will there be links and research done with both the sort of formal groups for ageing in the county and also the informal groups? In a previous life, when I worked for the Mental Health Trust, I ran some groups for people who were suffering from social isolation and obviously had mental health issues. And we were very conscious, particularly on the coast, where people retired there and then one partner died and the other person was left on their own, and that exacerbated mental health issues. Whether that's sort of going to be part of the mix that's going to be looked into on this project. So I think it's interesting that we do this. Thank you, Chairman.
So if I can come in on that, Councillor Martha, it's Samantha Neal. It's one of the discussions that we were having with our colleagues on Friday at Centre for Ageing Better, and particularly talking to Care and Repair England about the housing work that we want to do. And it's absolutely fundamental that we don't start from a position of making assumptions about people's needs and desires. And absolutely, as you say, if you look at Greater Manchester, the key partner in Greater Manchester is an older person's forum. We have had a debate about whether we need to restart something like that in Lincolnshire, but I think the view at the moment is there are lots of groups that we can engage with, and actually there's maybe more richness by engaging with different types of groups in different parts of the county. So it might be through Health Watch, it might be through tenant and residents groups attached to a housing provider, it could be by specialist groups who have certain health conditions. So we've got some mapping out of that to do to make sure that we don't inadvertently miss people. But that co-production element of understanding what it feels like to stand in somebody else's shoes is fundamental to this, yeah.
If I can just say, Chairman, one thing I've been struck during the pandemic is the number of groups that have sprung up supporting people in their communities. And only the other night I was at an open air meeting for a group with social distancing, etc. That in one of the villages within my division, and they obviously they actually produced a written report on their work, and they were highlighting the number of cases that people had dealt with who were isolated and so on. And I think that there's an absolute wealth of material out there, which is not necessarily captured by the more formal organisations, but perhaps we could tap in through the Resilience Forum, for example, because they should have a log of all the organisations that have sprung up across the county for the pandemic. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I've got Christine, and then Julia. Did you put your hand up to speak? If you did, you're after Christine.
No, I'm fine. It's okay. It's been answered.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just a couple of observations, if I may. First of all, the excellent news today about the work that's going to be done to halt type 2 diabetes where possible with the dietary information. I mean, the bill for diabetes type 2 is 10 billion a year or something dreadful. And this new programme, which I hope Lincolnshire will get a fair share of the pilot that's being rolled out across the country. That's such excellent news. Type 2 diabetes is so prevalent, and it is a lifestyle disease which we could do so much about, and this looks really promising. Another thing is social isolation is a killer. Loneliness is a killer for older people. And for me, the transition for so many people who retire and then find their lifestyle changes so much and they don't know how to cope with it. That's a real problem, I find. And that leads on to something which is barely mentioned with that cohort of the 50, 60-year-olds as you approach retirement, is the problem about money worries. Because people who have been used to a regular income and then find they manage on a pension, and I go into so many elderly people's homes, and there's usually two things. They're either, in the winter, they're either freezing cold or they're boiling hot. And the ones that are freezing cold are either paranoid about the bills or are terrified of getting large bills in, and certainly don't approach anybody for any help. I just think there are things that obvious things that we can do things about, but it's people are proud and they don't like to think I can't manage on my own, and we must say none of us can manage on our own nowadays. We're all interconnected. But community is a big thing. We've all found in this pandemic the importance of community, but social isolation, money worries, and lifestyle diseases like diabetes type 2 are real killers, and they're all things that we can do a great deal about. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I mean, I went. It was a workplace, and what they did was when people were coming up to retirement, and it is in here about working and trying to get a more friendly aging working. But what they'd actually done is done a phased retirement plan. So instead of working 5 days, they basically dropped them down to 3 days a week, then 2 days and 1 day, and in effect did it like a 2 to 3 year retirement phasing to retirement, which actually really helped people get their act together for retirement. And I think it's sort of one of those things that as we sort of look forward, I mean, to me, that's always a good thing because you allow some younger person to come through. You've still got the elderly person with all the knowledge. And it's in effect just getting businesses to gear more up this line of thinking rather than losing the guy at 65 that's got all the knowledge. He doesn't know what to do with himself. When you go from a full week to no week, I mean, that's been half the problem with lockdown. Everyone suddenly, even those that are off work, suddenly didn't know what to do with themselves all day long. And I think there is a lot. And the other element there of nutrition, I mean, I'm a big believer that I'm in the food industry, and we leave school and college and universities without really knowing what is a good, stable diet. And it's all right saying we need one of your 5 a day, but actually, where do carbohydrates fit into all of this? Where does protein fit into all of this? Don't the two clash a bit? Yes, they do, but you don't need them all, but you sometimes need supplements and all the other bits. And I think that in some sense, we've got it so complicated, we've lost the real basic approach to what you need as a decent standard diet. And it's not that complicated. It's just portion control and other bits. But I think sometimes we've lost that in the mix. And I don't think really people really understand. And I know we're going to bring new calorie counts in and all of that. But if you actually said, what's the average calories that most people need a day? Well, they don't need many more than 2,000 unless they're on a serious exercise mission. So I think sometimes we need to just stand back and do a basic format and bring people back on the journey again. That's my sort of bit of a take on it. And I think you're right. Diabetes, especially, well, really, it's only, well, diabetes 1 manage their diets predominantly very well because they have to, I think. Diabetes 2, actually, they can supplement still a bad diet by sort of, well, doing the injections, etc. Or they don't even do that, some of them nowadays. Anybody wants to comment further?
Hi, Hugo.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, Hugo. Thanks. Yes. I just want to say it looks a very promising report, and I think for me the essential thing is whatever we do about this, it has to be really led by the individuals themselves. That it has to be very person focused and centered upon the individual, because obviously I get the impression, sort of certainly with casework I do, that the most people who are in receipt of sort of social care actually do know what they want, and I think we need to be mindful of that, and sometimes and perhaps not try to impose a one size fits all on people, but to make it very much person centered. But the specific issue I wanted to speak to was disabled facilities grants, because at the moment I'm certainly, with one piece of casework I'm currently working on, there seems to be, and as you know, I'm also on South Coast Stephen District Council as well. I seem to think there seems to be a problem with the interface between the county and districts regarding disabled facilities grants. At SK, every year they sort of say, oh, well, we've not spent our disabled facilities grant, and they say it's because the county haven't contacted us. And then when you speak to the county, they say, oh, well, you know, yes, we have been speaking with the districts, and the problem is with the districts. So I'm just wondering if as part of this, we could actually have a bit of a look at disabled facilities grant to actually figure out if there is a logjam somewhere or a blockage between county and district, so we actually identify where it is and try to actually put it right. Because, you know, I know of, say, this particular piece of casework I've got now, where I've got a lady who probably really could do with some money from the disabled facilities grant to modify her home. And yet I know that SK are underspent on it, and it just seems to be there's this slight disconnect. So it's just some work about bringing all that together I think would be really, really useful. But apart from that, it sounds very promising. Thank you.
Julie?
Two questions. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Is fuel poverty means tested?
In the sense, in terms of the definition of fuel poverty?
Yeah, you know, when Hugo said that people, obviously, I think, you know, in residential homes particularly, people tend to be too hot. Yet when they're left independently, they often save on fuel, and I just wonder what the system is. I'm not very clear on it, so that was my first question. Does anybody know?
I'll just come in and give you an example. Actually, what we have in Lincolnshire is a lot of sort of the old council houses that were built in rural areas. And there are mechanisms of getting around this, but often some of those houses in rural areas haven't got gas connections. So they have to buy bulk oil. And so, of course, if you are in effect struggling to suddenly go and buy a month or 2 months fuel up front and pay for it, actually can put you into fuel poverty. Now, that's just one example, but that's a classic case in Lincolnshire where I've been into someone's house, they're watching the pennies, and then actually, they couldn't afford to get the money to fill the tank up, so they then have an electric bar heater that's costing a fortune.
Yeah.
And in effect, they're in a real slippery downward slope. Now, there are mechanisms of helping to fund that, but that's a sort of one sort of case. But Sam, I'll let you come in here.
I think there's a whole raft of issues tied up within that. Some of it relates back to what Michelle was saying about the standard of existing housing and the type of insulation that's in there. Some of that is people's attitudes and perceptions about whether they can afford or can't afford to put the heating on. So there's a whole raft of things in there. We have been successful. I can provide some more information for committee members if you've been interested in doing a piece of work with North Lincs and North East Lincolnshire to draw in some external funding around fuel poverty and support, which is really good. But I think what we've tended to do in the past is we've tended to put information out to the general public. So what we tend to find then is that those who are interested and capable will apply for funding, but those who maybe need a bit more help don't always put themselves forward. I think one of the exciting things now with the Housing, Health and Care Delivery Group, which reports to the Health and Wellbeing Board, is over the last couple of months we've got the CCG on board. And what the CCG are really keen to start to do now is to target people with us, so that where somebody has a particular health condition that is made worse by cold or by excess heat, because both things come into there, that we can work with them to target more effectively. Michelle may want to say a little bit more about that, but I think that's quite a new step forward for us. It also relates a little bit to Councillor Whittington's point about DFGs, that we've tended to operate as different bits of the system doing our own bit and maybe looking at our own processes. What this is really about is flipping it round and saying, what is it that the customer wants and needs, and then can we adapt our services around that? Michelle, do you want to just say anything around the affordable warmth and DFG?
That's what I didn't understand, whether it was self-referral, people ask for help, and obviously then you've got pride issues, or whether you're increasingly moving to sort of targeting people and having I'm not saying a list, but you know what I mean? Yeah.
Okay, if I may come in, there are 2 points that I'd like to make. One is around when we talk about the looking at things from the perspective of the customer. So example I'll give is if you've got a member of staff that's going into somebody's property to carry out an assessment for an adaptation, but actually that person is also living in fuel poverty, and you recognise those things, what we need to make sure is that our system can respond to that, and that we don't have any of our staff walk away from that house and not having dealt with that issue as well. So that again is about that system-wide approach if we're genuinely going to get the best outcomes for our customers. The other thing that I think is important is around where are the levers in the system. So one which isn't automatically obvious is our housing standards and enforcement type services, who actually when they're going in and they're identifying issues around affordable warmth, rectifying those are key elements of us being able to improve those health outcomes for people that live in those properties. Within one of the Lincolnshire districts at the moment, they're carrying out a pilot which is tackling private rented properties who have energy performance ratings of F or G. And, yes, we can see that as an enforcement project. Yes, there is a compliance element to that, but actually the outcomes that we're interested in are the difference that makes for the people that are living in those properties. So when we look at the whole picture, it's about understanding all of those elements and how they all fit together, because health and wellbeing is such a broad thing, isn't it, in a broad term.
Thank you. Thanks very much. That's answered my question.
One final thing from me. How are you doing your yearly, i.e. summary report, evidence base? Are you doing like a annual where we can get a sort of, this is what we've achieved this year, these are some of the examples? I presume you must be feeding into the system somewhere.
So that's one of the first things that we will be doing when the partnership manager comes on board, is to make sure we've got a work programme. The work programme is very clear about the key milestones in terms of where we're wanting to get to, but starts to identify some of the outcomes that we're looking to achieve as well. I think I just want to go back to the phraseology around this as well, because Centre for Ageing Better and a lot of organisations now talk about test and learn. And part of this is about understanding what doesn't work as well as what does work. So there will be some things that we try that we come back and say, do you know what, that hasn't worked for X, Y or Z, and we can improve it by A, B and C. So we will be putting all of those frameworks together. More than happy to come back to scrutiny at whatever period is appropriate for you. The formal reporting process will be accountability to the Health and Wellbeing Board, but that doesn't preclude coming back here at all, and I think would be really helpful, because I think engaging members at both district, county and town and parish level actually is really important to make sure that we can progress with this. I think the other key thing I just wanted to say, really last thing from my point of view, is a lot of this is about perceptions as well, and about changing the language and changing the conversation around a lot of these issues. I was really struck with what Andy was saying about a lot of these conditions are not inevitable. Just because you are getting older does not mean you will automatically have X, Y, and Z. You may, but actually there's a lot that you can do. It puts control back into your hands. And I think that's what a lot of this programme is about, is tackling some of those preconceptions. You also gave the analogy about having a bath. I renovated a bathroom recently and put a bath in it. Why on earth did I do that, other than thinking the next person who buys this house will want a bath? It's outmoded, really, isn't it, for a lot of people? So I think a lot of this is about picking up on what people think, what they feel, and having a robust conversation about that, and looking at what things might put that control back in their hands. So it's very much about a programme that works with and not does to people.
Yeah, and actually just one thing that you did mention in there, which I think is actually very vital, really. You mentioned about communicating with parishes, and I think that actually they are the ones where the message needs to be what others do and how they've done it in their area. So it helps roll it out further if it's successful in one. The parish council will pick up on things, and if they think their community will benefit, they're not all going to do it. But if you get 2 or 3 that do it, it sort of keeps the ball rolling and it develops it, doesn't it? And I think, you know, the one thing I know going around parish councils is that's where it comes really good for them. So a feed into them with that parish slant will be really good.
And I think that's the beauty of this programme, that it enables us to work at that grassroots level. So if we adopt a Lincolnshire housing standard, then parish councils are at the forefront of some of those planning applications. But we have the opportunity as well to influence national government policy through this programme as well. So, you know, it's ambitious. We're trying to do a lot. It's 5 years that we're going to be working on this, and potentially beyond that. But it feels a really optimistic opportunity to build on the strengths that we've already got.
Excellent. Okay, well, we'll let you get everything all up and running and everyone in position, and I think it'll be more next year when we sort of follow it through, and then we have our own election, so we'll have to just see, or will we, won't we? But anyway, I think, yeah, let's get everything up and running, and then we'll have a look in the new year and see how it's all progressing. But great news story, and wish you all the well with shaping it up.
Thank you.
Okay. Right, we'll go on to item then number 6, extra care housing development, Linelands, Nettleham with Lace Housing. And we've got Kevin Kendall, Assistant Director of Corporate Property, Emma Rowett, Project Manager, and might have somebody else, I'm not sure. Hi, Kevin.
Good afternoon, Hugo.
Welcome.
Right, so if I can introduce the item, and this is a pre-decision report due to go to executive tomorrow, and the committee today is invited to make comments on the report. You may recall we brought a report last year regarding the Winds Court in Lincoln, a similar scheme, and this is now one we're looking to develop with Lace Housing, a housing association. So the report tomorrow recommends a further 1.99 million of the designated capital budget is released to enable the development of extra care at the former Lineland site in Nettleham for the scheme to commence in spring of 2021. And it will be a partnership between Lace Housing and the County Council, and for the anticipated demand for extra care in the West Lindsey area. The contribution from the County Council would provide nomination rights on 20 units for a 30-year period for first refusal, and importantly, no void risk for the County Council. The scheme will provide alternative accommodation for residents, enabling them to maintain independence when they're unable to live at home any longer. And the proposal also includes the disposal of the former Nineland site to Lace Housing for nil value. And I'll go into that in a bit more detail later in the report. We've also had to demonstrate we don't conflict with state aid regulations, and again we've overcome that, and that's again mentioned later in the report. The summary of the report does state that this to proceed is subject to the Lace Housing Board approval. I'm pleased to say since the report was drafted, Lace Housing have now confirmed their board has approved the scheme, which is a big step on the way, subject to the executive approving the scheme tomorrow. So the recommendation to the executive tomorrow is that the scheme is approved and the contribution of 1.99 million is provided towards the scheme. Just highlight a few more items from the report in a bit more detail for you. One point of note is that residents who will be living in the scheme, County Council Place residents, will be accessing care contracts, existing care contracts and the Wellbeing Service. So that enables good purchasing rates from the block contracted home care contracts. The nomination process that will be drawn up will be done jointly with Lace Housing, and that will include the practical delivery of the care and wellbeing vision. And there'll be a joint nominations panel, which will be live and ongoing to make sure there's a joint decision on allocations within the development. The scheme itself has got 43 units. As I mentioned earlier, the County Council is purchasing nomination rights on 20 of those for a 30-year period. In relation to the land, the County Council land, we own the site currently, and part of the funding for the scheme is from Homes England. And one of their grant conditions does require all reasonable measures to be included in the scheme for that land contribution to be at nil value. The County Council is able to make an undervalue proposal without Secretary of State approval, as it's below £2 million. In this case, the value of the land is £500,000. So we've produced an undervalue report to enable that to proceed. As I mentioned earlier as well, there is a state aid risk potentially, but we've managed to demonstrate that risk doesn't exist on this scheme, taking legal advice from external lawyers on the scheme, Bevan Britton. So in practical terms, the Lace Housing proposal is to demolish the existing building and replace it with an extra care facility of mentioned only 43 bedrooms, 41 of which are one-bedroom apartments, 2 of those are single-bedroom apartments, and with the scheme to commence construction in 2021. There are some initial plans and drawings in the appendices for your reference later in the report. In terms of the delivery model we're taking on this one, it's a similar model to the one for DeWint. The County Council is able to work with districts and housing associations, both districts which have an HRA, housing revenue account, or a housing association. And the model we've adopted for both is very similar. And the report itself refers to the preferred option. It's what's called a funding agreement. And what that means is we signed a funding agreement with Lace Housing, and that funding agreement provides access to those flats nominations that we've agreed. There are other options there mentioned, such as what's called the Hamburg Cooperation Agreement. That was ruled out because that actually requires a sharing of risk, including voids, and the model we've adopted through the funding agreement minimises the void risk to the County Council completely. So that was the option that's been adopted, or recommended, sorry. So it's recommended that the County Council proceeds with the scheme with Lace Housing for a commencement on site in spring 21. And the 2 principal benefits of the approach we're taking here is there's no void costs, and also it diverts potential residents away from residential placements to the extra care proposal. In terms of financial summary, the financial case, the funding source, the capital source is from the Adult Care Capital Reserve, and the payback period is estimated to be 19 years, so it's within the 30-year nomination period. And that's my conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. If anybody would like to ask a question or speak, please type in. But I think it's great that we're getting there now with this, with building more of these, and it just lends itself to more modern day needs and reduces our reliance and gives that interim before hopefully they can stay there rather than necessarily going into a residential home. I think it's a great piece of work, and it has huge benefits. And I've sort of debated it in the sense in my own mind. I mean, are we, in some sense, the trouble is you still have to have a sense of scale with these projects. So it would be nice to have sort of like extra care housing scattered all around, sort of say Lincolnshire, but if you don't watch it, you then don't have enough in one area to generate social inclusion and all the other issues and sort of getting the support and the care that you need. So, and I think this is sort of, I would say it's a really good project. And my only thing is we closed it in 2011 and 12, and ideally just nice if we could sort of move some of these things on a bit quicker at times, but that's the world we live in at times, I suppose. But great that we're getting there, and good piece of work. Good project. Patricia, would you like to come in and say anything?
Yeah, no, you're right. This has been a long time coming, and I think Kevin would agree that we have sat around the table for a long time talking about, how we can develop this. And actually, joining up with Lace Housing has been a great idea, because actually, as I'm sure Kevin's told you, they can draw down majority of the money. So, and actually, I don't know whether anybody's been to have a look at any of Lace Housing's buildings, but they're great. They really are of a very high standard. And so, really pleased to be working with them on this project. And just behind this, they have got some other properties for older people as well, who aren't in need of extra care. They're like little flats. So those people will be then going down to the extra care building to have lunch and that, because there's a restaurant there. So, yeah, it's a great project. And, we've got a few more that we're planning. But, working with North Kesteven, Boston and that. So, yeah. But at the end of the day, we aren't the housing authority really for. So, we do need to start working with districts and getting them, if they've got areas where they need them, we can work with them. But, it's difficult for us, I think, as a county council, being able to get that funding that obviously district councils get probably much easier with the housing association. So, yeah, no, great. We just want to get the brick in the ground. Yeah. And so that we can, see it moving. So, but no, really happy that it's got this far.
Excellent. Thank you. Christine, would you like to come in?
Thank you very much. I'm really in favour of this. I've known Lace Housing for a long time, visited quite a few of their homes. They don't build extra care homes, they build communities, and it's wonderful to see the results they get. I'm totally in favour of this. We have struggled at South Holland for, I don't like to work out how many years, to get an extra care home off the ground. Network Rail has been one of the main inhibitors of the logjam, but we are hoping finally to get it done. And Lace Housing have been wonderful, and they've hung on in there through thick and thin with us. But I can't speak highly enough of this. I think it's an excellent scheme. I think it's I don't like the idea that people sometimes say, well, why do you put them near towns? Why do you put, and you think, well, just because you're old and need extra care doesn't mean you want to live in some far off place where you can't get to anything. You still want to be involved in local life to quite a good extent. And I'm so much in favour of this. Can't recommend it wholeheartedly enough. Thanks very much. Well done, Lace.
Thank you. Thank you. Glenn, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. And I do appreciate members' support over what is now some 5 years in progressing the a degree of extra choice in the housing offer that's available to older people in Lincolnshire and in due course people of working age. It's part of our future agenda by providing better forms of housing that are more suitable to people at different stages of their life. And I think given members' support, I'm rather hoping to build on that in the coming months with further schemes following both DeWint and hopefully tomorrow executive's approval, subject to scrutiny's views of Netlham as well. So really good progress. We're beginning to get a sense of momentum for this now, and I think it's so terribly important that we continue to build on this. Thank you.
Thank you. So, well, I've got no further speakers, and I think, hi, yeah, Julie.
I think it's a really excellent idea, and I agree with Christine. I think people increasingly want to live as independently as they can, and I think one of the major problems in life is having to sell your own house and move into a residential home or assisted housing. So this is like a halfway measure, isn't it, where people can still retain their independence, although they've got help. I think it's excellent. I think it's a real move in the right direction. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. So, well, we've been asked to agree any additional comments to be passed on to the executive. I think we're all completely in support of it. We welcome it. And I suppose if there's any sort of extra comments, one from me would be, can we try and sort of accelerate it? Now we've found the way in which it works for us in Lincolnshire. Is there a way in which we can now accelerate it a bit quicker to roll out? And that would be a really great thing. I don't know if everyone else is quite happy with that sort of comment. But if you are, then good. If you're not, you best speak up now, or else it'll go in the comments. So I will need to go to the vote, I think, on this, don't we? So
yes, please, Chairman.
So I need to ask
a proposer and a seconder. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got some comments that we're happy with what we said. Simon, you happy with what you've got? As well?
Yes, Chairman. That's all fine. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, so you need to just turn on the screens and then raise your hand. All those in favour?
Two, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, unanimous then, Chairman, from all those hands raised.
Brilliant. Thank you. It's not a bad system. We might actually, trouble is, sometimes it's the delay of getting everyone all together on one to know whether it's everybody agrees or not at times, but I think that was everybody seemed to agree. Anyway, well done. Thank you, Kevin, and wish you all well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go on to the next agenda item then, which is payment arrangements for residential care. So we have Pam Clipsome, Head of Finance, and Helen Glover, Principal Lawyer.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hello. Hello.
I think Helen's joined us as well. She was having some technical difficulties earlier, which we both seem to be experiencing. So we'll see how far we get through with this paper. Okay, so paper in front of you today is to talk about payment arrangements for residential care. And it's the payment basis that we currently pay on versus the option to go to a gross mechanism. Page 141 of the paper, under the council's payment arrangement, defines what is meant by net and gross. The main change being that currently each of our residential provider collects the service user contributions on behalf of the council under a gross payment mechanism. We would be responsible for collecting it all from the service user. That's the predominant change, and I say that's included on page 141. We do at the moment operate gross within some of our services already, so home care, daycare and community supported living, which is why this is just for residential care for today. The council took the decision to continue with net in 2018, and the tables from pages 143 onwards just show the main improvements that we've made since that decision. Predominantly financial assessments that we undertake to determine how much a service user's contribution is. The time taken from us being alerted to an assessment being needed to it being in place has improved dramatically from what was 17 weeks to now 28 days for the majority, and that's detailed on page 146. In addition to that, we've had a tremendous system development programme that remains on track, and that enables all of our systems to interact with each other. Again, that's detailed on page 146, and our proposal not only enables them to interact, but also rationalises our systems as well. The financial implications of moving to gross, originally highlighted in 2018 and detailed on page 147, has now reduced from the £601,000 implementation to 273,000. With further efficiencies still expected as we go through the introduction of the new finance system and other system developments between now and Q2 of 2021-22, when I remember which financial year I'm in. And that those will enable us hopefully to bring that 273,000 down further. The other element that was included in the 2018 paper was the debtor position. And again, we have strengthened our debt processes, and that is included with some of the examples on page 145, where the main concern is that the debt would increase if service users viewed them coming from a county council rather than an individual provider. And the debt review that we've got underway at the moment is demonstrating that that's not the case, and we've actually been quite successful in bringing those debts down. I think I'm just going to pause there because I think Helen might want to pick up on the LGO and then take any questions before we go on to the recommendations in the report. Helen, did you want to pick up anything on the LGO?
Hello there. Sorry, I just needed to unmute myself. I don't think there is anything specifically. I mean, this is the second public report. We had the first public report some time ago. As Pam has indicated, there was a very detailed paper that went to the council. It wasn't the right time. We had different considerations, but Pam's report shows just how far the council has come in its financial assessments, in moving on its systems, its operations, its efficiencies. And that has led the council and this report to recommend for very different reasons that actually things have changed, and the Ombudsman didn't agree with us last time. He wasn't satisfied with what the council's response was to the public report, but we now have, having brought the review forward, have very good reasons now to feel that this is the right time and for the right reasons the council should consider moving to a gross payment system rather than a net payment system. I'm happy to answer any specific questions. I think it does set out very clearly in the legal section the issues around the Ombudsman. But that review has been brought forward and seems to be particularly thorough, and has explained the differences between the decision that was made in 2018 and what was the rationale for that decision, together with now the information in the report that Pam has prepared, supporting consideration of a different payment arrangement for the council.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think we as a council, some might disagree, but my personal view is we as a council have done it absolutely right. Yes, it's always fine when the Ombudsman releases their report and want everything sorting out straight away, but when you've been on the council for a while, you understand we've had different operating systems, we've changed things, we're moving in a very good direction, but we can't just rush all that through, or else we'll end up with another issue further down the line. And I think that the way we're bringing it all together, and now is the timing, and it's right to do so, where we couldn't have really reacted much quicker because of the issues within our own running systems, and I think that's better. One thing that in some sense, and I think it is good that it's now as one, and I think actually I like the idea of the gross. I think it actually could bring it more under the spotlight, some of these situations that go on, actually, because it really becomes, it's back in our domain, not necessarily sat with a care home, sometimes chasing their own top-up fees. But so in some sense, I think we'll get a better picture of really the whole top-up system and how the whole thing comes together more, because it's now sits under us more. I know it did sit with us before, but it's just perhaps a better reporting mechanism.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's on the recommendations on page 140, that definitely has come out in the work that we've done so far, because we're able to streamline our processes, our systems. We haven't got the duplication of having to run net and gross. Your proposal is to just run one. So yeah. It does enable us to work in a very different way, all of which would improve the service users' experience, because again, we'd be able to do things a lot quicker, a lot more effectively for them, and it eliminates any risk of confusion that they may have between the service user and the provider around what financial assessment means, what their contributions are. We've still got a lot of queries, confusions on both parties. It would make it an awful lot simpler.
Yeah. So no, I'm happy with it anyway. And I can't remember when we brought Mosaic in now, but I don't think it was I think it was post that report, or is it just on that report?
Well, it's the developments within Mosaic that's enabling us to move now, and each of our services are moving gradually onto Mosaic. So yeah. Previously Mosaic was our care system, care record and assessment system, and we then had Abacus as bit of a nightmare in the background, apologies.
Don't worry.
We then had our finance systems that married our financial assessments. We're now moving to pay people through Mosaic as well. Community supported living's gone live, direct payments went live last week, and we're now preparing for both residential and non-residential to go live, which is why the decision around net and gross is quite key now, so we can build the systems in the most effective way to run smoothly.
Yeah.
I apologise for the animal chaos in the background.
Don't worry. Somebody knocked on my door and my animals kicked off. Luckily, I was on mute and not involved. But they're a little creature that we forget about on these Teams meetings. But no, that's very good. Anybody want to add any further comments? If not, I suggest we all, I think we go to
Chairman,
votes again. Yep.
Has Glenn Garrett got his hand up, or I don't know if Glenn's, is that an old indication?
Yeah.
No. Okay. Sorry.
So. Okay. So right. So I think we go to. Are we on? I think we're on a vote, aren't we? So.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Before we go to the vote, I need to declare an interest on this item. I've in that my mother is in residential care home, being part funded by the county council. So on this item, I'm going to formally abstain, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Okay. So the rest of us then, if we all go on screen and then raise your hands for, or.
Is that everybody? Let's have a look.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's everybody then, except for Councillor Whittington. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. So, okay. Well, that's the current business done for today. So we've just now got the works programme.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Chairman, shall I introduce the work programme paper?
Please, Simon.
Just to say that the items for the October meeting are listed on pages 162 and 163. There's one change to the list, and that is that the government proposals on the future funding of adult social care is one of the items that is unlikely to come forward in October. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Rob? As in Rob Fox?
Yeah, thanks, Hugo. It's when you were mentioning at the very beginning that at overview and scrutiny, you were pleased with how well adult care is doing. I just wanted to add that this morning I spoke to Louise Marsh, who's the chief exec of Stamford Evergreen Care Trust, which is one of these providers that helps out the elderly in Stamford, to see how things were going. And she was unstinting in her praise of the county council, an organisation called ESF, and Linker. I'm not sure what those acronyms mean, but I'm sure people here, Glenn is bound to. But she was extremely pleased. Specifically, she said their communications were excellent, the support was excellent, and anything to do with PPE was also excellent. She was unstinting in her praise, and I thought that you ought to know this, that adult social care need a big pat on the back for doing so well during this crisis period. So well done.
Yeah, excellent. That's that makes a lot of sense. Linker is in effect the support arm that brings all the sort of the more home care all together, sort of as one voice. Did I summarise that as well as it could be done, Glenn?
Indeed you did, Chair, and thank you very much, Councillor Fowkes. I'll make sure that those comments are passed on to colleagues in the department as well. Cuts across both adult care and public health. They are a great team. Thank you.
Yeah, indeed.
Thanks.
No, and it's great to hear that actually from a third party. So
yes.
Brilliant.
And it was unprompted. I was just asking her how things were going with the with the COVID situation and visits to old people and whatnot. And then she came out with all this stuff. She was really very pleased.
Yeah. No, I think well, overall it has been good. And actually, we've got the minutes of the last meeting, which does talk about some of the ways of working and all of that. And at some point, that'll need to come back into the agenda on the forward plan. But I think we have got them sort of semi in there. It's like most things, we are still waiting. There are elements of the government's future direction that we still wait for, that sort of means that we have to dot things about periodically. We think they're coming in October and they don't, and then we move them on to the next month or the next agenda and see if they at some point something's going to come forward. So, but has anybody got anything pressing that they want to add on, or?
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Yeah.
Hi. This is something really on the back of the question that I asked during the consideration of the first agenda item regarding disabled facilities grants. And as I say, I certainly get the impression when I sit as when I've been sitting as a district councillor, I'm on the finance committee, and they report the disabled facilities grant budget there, that it always seems to be underspent for South Kesteven, and that when you talk to LCC colleagues, they seem to be saying that I'm just wondering if it's possible to do a bit of piece of work to understand the linkage between the county and the district to make sure there aren't any logjams in the system, because I'm certainly, from a piece of casework I'm doing at the moment, identified the potential issue that there is a log jam there somewhere. And the second thing is on personal health budgets, which my understanding is that the personal health budgets which are coming in, a lot of that could be funded by health and not by us. I'm just wondering what work we're doing to identify our service users who possibly could better be seen under a personal health budget, which have the advantage of passing a lot of the cost over from our budgets on to health, and potentially so just a couple of things. And so it's just come out of this piece of casework that I've been working on recently. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I'll let Glenn come in just to bring a bit more back to your first point on the disabled facilities grant. In theory, we should be able to look at it as a district-wide on, in effect, number of jobs and the amount of monies maybe spent by each district in relation with us. Although, in some sense, that's not necessarily quite a true reflection of the population needs in certain areas. So we do have to just be mindful of that. Glenn?
Thank you, Chair. So with respect to disabled facilities grants, the actual budget for DFGs is worth some 6+ million in Lincolnshire every year now, but it's held by the districts. The occupational therapists provide the assessments which guide the districts to a view as to whether DFG should be allocated or not. We've been working on this for about 18 months now through the Housing, Health and Care Delivery Group. In fact, last week they received a report on DFG use across all 7 districts in Lincolnshire. So we can certainly provide an update. I don't know whether Councillor Bradwell is still on the call, but she's been very closely associated with this work. So again, when we turn to the future agenda for the council committee, we can possibly add in a report at some near future date. But I hopefully will be able to reassure Councillor Whittington that quite a lot of progress has been made in this area from at least the council's area of responsibility. In terms of personal health budgets, yes, we've been working on this for a couple of years now. We tend to focus on people who are recipients of continuing health care. Now, that is already a health budget and often is associated with some funding also from the county council for social care services. So we do have a scheme and an approach which is agreed with our health colleagues. And again, if the committee is interested, more than happy to bring a report on that, probably at the same time that we can give you a report on direct payments as well.
Yes, that sounds good. Can you liaise with Simon then to slot that in then?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for your answers, Glenn. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Any other questions, anybody? Okay, well, thank you all for coming along. And just finally, Liz, nice to see you here, by the way. You're still about. Hi.
Yes, I've managed to join you. Thank you very much for waiting for me. You didn't, but no, I'm sorry. Unavoidable other problem to deal with. So, but thank you. I'm sorry if I've missed an interesting meeting, but sometimes that just happens.
Yeah, no, but nice to see you here anyway.
Thank you very much.
So, brilliant.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming, and see you next time. Thank you.